So my friends at Atlas and Inside Edition sent me a copy of Persona, the official cookbook. This is a cookbook based on Persona 3, 4, and 5. It's both dishes that appear in-game and dishes that are inspired by the characters. Now, this book is really good. I think that there's a lot of things that are great about it. If you just want to like have it as a collector's item, there's that component. But I wanted to try out the recipes too. Right here is a basic dashi on the introduction page. And there's a bunch of other good stuff. Like there is a consideration for allergies and dietary restrictions. And there's also a conversion chart. So if you're not American, there's a version that converts things for you. And also a difficulty index so you can see which things are easy, intermediate, or hard. I decided to cook one of the most iconic dishes from Persona, and that was the Rainy Day Special Mega Beef Bowl. Now, this was something that I thought would be interesting to cook because it was classed as easy, the cook time was 20 minutes, and it said that it yielded one bowl. Naturally, I had to acquire all the ingredients, and the biggest, most difficult thing to get was the 4 pounds of thinly sliced ribeye. Now, this is shabu shabu. I got it from a Japanese market, as well as all of this stuff too. Now, the first step is to actually prep the ingredients. The only real prep that really mattered was thinly slicing the onion. There was actually supposed to be 3 large onions, but I only did 1. I also started cooking the rice. And now, this is one of my complaints. Step 1 is combine the dashi, sake, soy sauce, mirin, and sugar into a very large skillet. Bring it to a boil over high heat, stirring until the sugar has dissolved and the raw alcohol smell has dissipated. Now, a lot of this stuff was confusing to me because it seemed like it was asking me to incorporate all things all at once, but if I did that, I wouldn't be able to tell when the sugar was completely dissolved. So I decided to actually make the dashi first, then add the sugar, then add the sake and soy sauce and mirin, and then I waited until I saw the alcohol smell dissipate. You could actually see the vapors as it's dissipating. Now, this was all well and good, but for that to be a single step was a little confusing to me, only because it seemed too vague, at least too vague for me. I wanted more details. And I think that's kind of what was lacking from this instruction, because the entire recipe is 5 steps. And each step is multiple steps actually. And I think that was a consideration for the thickness of the book, because if they actually did make it more detailed, that would take up more pages. This takes up 2 pages. 1 page is the image of the finished product, and the other is the actual description, the ingredients list, and then the steps. And I think part of my complaint comes down to the description being fun, but it takes up too much space. And ultimately, I wanted more in terms of things to do. Like I wanted the steps to be broken down better, and I wanted to have images of what it looks like in process. They didn't have to do that with every single recipe, but I think some of the recipes could have benefited from it. This one is one that I would have benefited from seeing more images, just because instructions unclear. This is my first time doing it, and although it was classified as easy, I will say that this step 1 for me added an additional 10 to 15 minutes just because I had to actually prepare the dashi. And I think this one presupposes that you have a quart of dashi pre-prepared. Now, in addition to that, there is an error across every single recipe that calls for dashi. It actually tells you to go to page 31, which is the miso soup recipe. The miso soup recipe does not contain the recipe for the dashi. And if you go to the miso soup recipe, you will see that even it tells you to go to page 31 for the dashi recipe. The dashi recipe is not on page 31, and it's a glaring typo. It's actually a little frustrating because it's actually on page 7. And because it's copy and pasted every time that there is dashi called for in the recipe book, it just looks kind of sloppy. It looks unprofessional. Now, step 2 was confusing to me because it says to add onions and return to a boil, but it never told me to reduce heat. So I was really confused as to when I was supposed to have reduced the heat. But then the immediate second sentence is reduced to a simmer and cook. So it's telling me to add the onions, return it to a boil, which I'm guessing it means get the water back to a boil and then reduce it back down to a simmer. But the way it was phrased was unclear for me personally. It then says to stir occasionally, and you do that until the onions are softened and translucent. And that takes about 10 minutes. It did actually take about 10 minutes for me, but I would have liked an image for this because I didn't know what they meant by like onion softening or turning translucent. I knew once I saw it, but I didn't know when I was just reading it. So I didn't know what I was looking for, if that makes sense. Then after that, you gotta drape the slices of meat over the top of the onions in an even layer. This was actually relatively easy to do. I basically just, I would just try to build a layer, then add another one, build a layer, add another one. My mistake was that when I was taking the meat out of the packaging, I thought I had actually placed part of the packaging into the skillet, so I actually panicked and had to look for it. It wasn't in the skillet, so that was kind of like just a waste of time, and it kind of messed things up because while this is cooking, you're supposed to bring it back up to a boil again, and then you skim off the scum that appears on the top, which there was some scum for me. It wasn't that much, but again, part of the reason why it was not that much was actually because I mixed it around trying to get to what I thought was the actual packaging being put down in the skillet, which it wasn't. So just to review, step 3 is actually a little bit more complicated than step 2. Step 3 is drape the slices of meat over the onions in an even layer. Increase that to a boil again, skim off any scum that appears, then reduce to a simmer. Cover and cook. And then you stir occasionally until the beef is cooked through and the sauce is slightly reduced. Now, I didn't know what they meant by slightly reduced because I was like, do you just want me to keep boiling it until it's like boiled away? What if the meat cooks before it's reduced and I wasn't really paying attention to the volume or how high the overall fluid had gotten? So I was really unclear on that part, and this one also ends with giving you a breakdown of how long it should take. It says it should take 5 to 7 minutes. It took maybe 10 minutes for me. So one of the pieces of prep that I didn't capture was the part where I grated the ginger. It takes a lot to grate ginger because this recipe calls for about a tablespoon, which is a pretty sizable amount. And it was much more than I anticipated when I cut off a piece and grated it down. It was a lot. So anyway, you stir the grated ginger in, you remove it from the heat, and you keep it covered for a while you fry the egg. This part I screwed up on because I don't cook eggs anyway besides scrambled, and I didn't wait for the little pan that I was using to get hot enough so it wouldn't stick. So I got the egg to stick to the pan, and it kind of ruined the presentation, I'm not gonna lie. They even give you the tips here, and it's a little bit more explanatory. Heat the oil in a small non-stick skillet over medium heat. When you feel the heat radiating off the pan, crack the egg into the pan. I don't know what they mean by when you feel the heat radiating off the pan, because I feel like you can feel the heat radiating pretty quickly. This is another thing where I just didn't know what they were asking or what I was expected to know. But after you feel that, you crack the egg into the pan, you season with a pinch of salt, and then you cover the pan. Now, I think one of the other parts that really bothered me about this recipe is that I didn't know how many pans or pots or utensils I needed in general. So actually I would have liked for the recipe to explain parts of that, like not just having an ingredients list, but also having a list of needed materials, because if I didn't have the large skillet and a smaller pan and the pot to cook the rice, I would have been screwed. But I didn't know I needed all those things until I was reading the recipe. As I was reading it, I would read, I need a small skillet. Like, I wish it would have just been more explicit from jump with a materials list, if that makes sense. Now, this says that it takes 2 minutes to cook the egg. I don't know how long it took me, but I definitely messed it up, and I also overcooked it, so there's that. Now, the biggest struggle for me was the plating of it all, because I plated the rice, which was relatively easy, but scooping 4 pounds of beef onto a bowl in order to make it actually the 4-pound rainy day special mega beef bowl was nigh impossible. I couldn't figure out structurally how to do that. I was like, maybe I can use toothpicks, maybe I can use some other kind of thing to fix them in place so I could stack them proper, but it was falling apart. So I didn't actually put all 4 pounds into the thing. I probably only stacked maybe 2 pounds or 2.5 pounds max. Now, I will say it does explain in step 5 how to build up the bowl, but it doesn't do it very specifically. It just says scoop the rice into a massive bowl, and then it recommends a serving bowl or a large ramen bowl. Mound the beef and onion on top of the rice, and ladle the sauce, which is basically the stuff that you marinated and cooked the beef in. It becomes a delicious sauce, by the way. It probably would have been even better or have a stronger umami taste if I used more onion. But you just ladle the sauce over as much as you want. Now, doing this ruins the integrity of the rice, So you better stack up everything first and then ladle everything down. Otherwise, it ruins the integrity and it'll be an even more unstable base, and you will not be able to stack all 4 pounds like I wasn't able to stack all 4 pounds. Now, as for the taste, I gotta say, I genuinely enjoyed it. Like, everything about it was delicious. My only complaint was basically the steps to get there was too much. It was 5 steps, but it was really more like 12 or 15 steps. And again, I could have benefited from not just an ingredients list, but also from a materials list. I would have benefited from pictures. I would have benefited also from the dashi page list to be accurate. Now, that being said, this was relatively easy. I don't think I struggled at any point in time. I was more just confused, and the steps were simple. So now that I know how to do it, I understand exactly what they're calling for. But if you're someone who doesn't have any experience regarding this kind of meal prep, it is a little daunting, if I'm honest. Now, I do think that overall the recipe was great, and I'm going to try a couple more recipes from this book. I would highly recommend you invest in this book too. It's relatively cheap. I'll leave a link to the Amazon listing. And yeah, I rate this meal a solid 7 out of 10. I rate this book a solid 7 out of 10. Again, there are some complaints, and I've made it very clear what I think of these things. I really genuinely hope they do more cookbook type stuff, but I will say that calling it the Persona Cookbook is a little annoying because it's only covering 3, 4, and 5, and it's only covering specific versions of 3, 4, and 5. So obviously it excludes the female protagonist from Persona 3, and it excludes all the side characters from the various spin-off games. Like, I would have genuinely wanted to cook the hot dog thing that Ray eats in Persona Q, you know? There's something there, and I feel like there could have been more variety in that regard. Also, the meals only being inspired by the playable characters was a bit of a miss for me, because I do think that there's some characters from the games that have food associated with them that would have allowed for more variety. Like, why did we not get something based on the gourmand from Persona 3, for instance? Some missteps here and there, but overall, it's a good book. And that's it for the video. Goodbye, fellow Megatenists.